Good afternoon, everyone, and a hearty welcome to you all. Today is Monday, September 23rd, 2024. We are gathered for our 3 p.m. land use hearing. I appreciate that you're all here. We'll begin, as is our tradition, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please participate as you are able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, thank you all very much for your participation. My name is John Kafalis, Larimer County Commissioner from District 1, currently the Chair of the Board of Commissioners. I'm joined by my Commissioner colleagues, Kristen Stevens from District 2 and Jody Shattuck McNally from District 3. Taking notes and recording the meeting. Of course, it's a public meeting and it's broadcast. We have Deirdre O'Neill from the Clerk and Recorder's Office. Across the way, the handsome fellow there in the suit and the tie is someone from our county attorney's office, Frank Haug. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Jenny, who is our planning manager. She can explain a little bit about the procedures, protocol, and then introduce her colleagues and state anything else that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We respectfully request that all members of the audience silence their electronic devices. Please help yourself to a copy of the agenda and hearing procedure instructions located on the wall just to the right of the entrance, right here. And they're also posted online for anyone joining us via Zoom at larimer.org/BOCC/commissioners-meetings. Please wait until speak until you're recognized by the chair. Please maintain civility, refraining from audience applause, comments, or disruptions, whether positive and or negative. Please make all comments to the Board of County Commissioners from the podium. A portable microphone is available as needed. Please state your name at the beginning of your comments and provide the spelling of your name if it's unique. Please speak directly into the microphone so that those joining us remotely may hear. Upon a request, we do have assisted listening devices available for the hearing impaired. For those on Zoom, attendees will be muted until they are recognized by the chair. If an online attendee wishes to speak or requests that a consent item be removed, please use the raise your hand function on the Zoom control bar or *9. So joining me at the dais here, we have Laura Culleton and Sam Lasher from the Planning Department. Our admin support today is Shalana Lasite. Joining us in the tables here, we have planner J.C. McNulty. In engineering, we have Connor Sheldon, Stephen Rothwell, and David Pringle hiding in the back. From our health department, we have Leah Schneider and Ashton Broden, and we have Alan Keys from our code enforcement. With that, I would like to give you one last update. Staff does recommend moving the tabled item to the discussion portion of the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank you very much. Before I go through what is listed on the agenda, I would like to explain about items that are listed as consent agenda items. And these are typically items with no perceived controversy and routine administrative actions. These items appear at the beginning of the agenda and will not be discussed unless they are removed from the agenda. Staff recommends action on the consent items, and the board will consider all items at once without further discussion. Anyone may request an item to be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. The board will usually consider actions on removal from the consent immediately following approval of the consent agenda. So that is an explanation of what consent agenda items are and discussion items. So with that in mind, let me go through what the list of proposals that are before us, and we'll go from there. As was mentioned by Jenny, the first item listed on the agenda is a tabled item from August 12, 2024. This is with regard to the Riverside Farm second filing, amended plat and right-of-way vacation, file number 19-land 3877. And because we received some additional input on this particular application, as Jenny indicated, we are moving that to a discussion item. The next 4 items, I believe, are public consent items, and I will go through the list. The first is the Arion Heritage Trust amended plat, file number 23-land 4304. The second is the Fort Collins Soccer Club amended special review, file number 23-zone 3422. The third consent agenda item is the Scragg ALA accessory living area appeal, file number 24-zone 3654. And the fourth consent agenda item is the Austin and Carr appeal, file number 24-zone 3674. Again, those 4 items are consent agenda items. At this time, I'll ask my colleagues if they wish to remove any of those items off consent, and then we'll check with you all if you wish that to happen. Commissioner Stevens?
I do not wish to move anything.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally?
Not, sir.
Okay. So is there anyone here in attendance in person who wishes to remove any of those 4 items from the consent agenda? By doing so, there would be a full discussion, a presentation, the applicant, public comment, etc. Let's see, is it, Shalena, can you check? Is there anybody online who may wish to pull any of these items off consent?
If there's anybody online who wishes to pull any of the items off of the consent agenda, please use the raise hand function. There are no hands online, or no hands raised.
Okay. Then at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve those 4 consent agenda items in mass. Staff has recommended approval with various conditions of approval. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, would you be kind enough to do that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I just want to clarify, does that mean, do I need to mention the item that was tabled that we removed to the, do I need to mention that in my motion?
Frank, you want to comment? I don't think so.
No, I think it's clear that the item that you're discussing, which is the Riverside item, has been moved to the discussion agenda, and so
think
the
we're
consent only includes those 4 that Commissioner Kafalis listed.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the items on the consent agenda subject to the conditions in the staff reports, and further move to authorize the chair to sign the findings and resolutions.
Thank you. That is indeed a proper motion. Colleagues, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those items pass 4-0, and guess what? If you're here for those, have a nice afternoon. Okay. So, as was mentioned, we now have 2 discussion items. And the first one, again, a tabled item from August 12th, is the Riverside Farm second filing amended plat and right-of-way vacation. And our lead planner on that one is Ms. Laura Culleton. Laura, I'm sure you know the routine. You're on.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you hear me? Okay. Let's see. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Colleton. I am the planner for this project, the Riverside Farm Second Filing Amended Plat and Right-of-Way Vacation, file number 19 Land 3877. The second filing of Riverside Farm is located in Berthoud, approximately a quarter mile southeast of the intersection of Highway 287 and West County Road 4E, and it's located directly south of the Riverside Farm first filing. The zoning of this land is RR2, which is rural residential, and the existing plat has 24 lots, and the proposed number of lots with this amended plat is 16. And then this image just kind of gives you a good idea of where the second filing is in relation to the first filing. The applicant is requesting an amended plat for the entire second filing of the Riverside Farm subdivision to reduce the number of lots from 24 to 16 and to increase the size of Tract A, which is their open space. They are also pursuing a right-of-way vacation for a portion of Sweetwater Lane that was originally proposed to serve lots that are now being removed from the subdivision. This is a background giving you a timeline of this project. So the Riverside Farm PUD, the second filing, was approved in 2007. Economic conditions at the time resulted in a delay in development and a change of ownership. And then in 2013, we had flooding of the Little Thompson River. This damaged the site, and then FEMA authorized new floodplain mapping of the river. This updated floodplain mapping resulted in most of the original 24 platted lots in the second filing undevelopable as they are currently recorded. So then in 2019, the applicant submitted this amended plat application to propose a reduction in the number of lots for the second filing, increase the open space acreage, and a right-of-way vacation. The overall goal of this application is just to reconfigure the second filing so that it results in developable parcels. And then there was a lapse in time just addressing referral agency comments and making sure that they had updated water commitment, and that's why we've got the land use hearing about 5 years later. This is an image of the proposed amended plat that I can come back to if we have questions specifically for it. And then this image shows the current configuration of the lots with the floodplain mapping overlaid on top. So you can see kind of where we're talking about with the Little Thompson River on the south end. And then we've got the review criteria for amended plats, which I'm happy to go over in depth if you all have questions. Additionally, we also have the review criteria for the right-of-way vacation. And then we have our staff recommendation, 2 separate motions, the first one for the right-of-way vacation, and then the second motion for the amended plat. And I do have a 5th condition that is added on here that was not in the original staff report, and that was just added to ensure that we have proper collateral to make sure that the infrastructure is completed for this development. And so after that, the lots can be sold. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those or go back to any slides.
Great, Laura. Thank you very much. Colleagues, at this time, do you all have any questions for Laura Culleton? Commissioner Stevens, anything at this moment?
Yeah, so can you go back to the map slide? And did you say there was going to be an open space? Is that the area that would have been floodplain that will become open space then? Is that?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all this information on maps. Can you tell me with the open space and the number of feet that from the riparian area to the closest lot or back lot, how many feet between, do you know, happen to know?
Not off the top of my head, but I can measure in the background and try to get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And okay, that's all I have for now. I'll probably come back to that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Commissioner. I have one question at this time, Laura. Regarding the right-of-way vacation of a portion of Sweetwater Lane that was originally proposed to serve the lots, and now that configuration is proposed to change. Could you show us where that actually is on the map?
Yes. 1 second. So if you see kind of how the road continues on down here on the kind of south part where the blue starts. So that is technically right-of-way that's already been dedicated with the original platting. And so when we reconfigure the lots and adjust the road, we technically have to vacate that portion because it's not going to be used as right-of-way anymore. And so the new configuration looks like this, and it kind of ends with this cul-de-sac bulb down here, and it doesn't continue on down where Tract A is.
And how will folks access this proposed second filing subdivision off of the county roads? Off of, here, let me go back to the normal Thank you,
map.
Laura.
Yeah, no problem. Just 1 second.
And if it's appropriate, perhaps someone from engineering can enlighten us. Oh, there you go, pulling up the map. Thank you. That's a much better picture. Helps me to understand.
So it looks like they take access off of County Road 4E down to Sweetwater Lane, and then Parkstone Court would enter down here.
Thanks, Laura. Stephen, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so the original filing one takes access just like Laura showed there. There was an included emergency access easement that runs from Parkstone Court out to the east there. So that's a gated emergency access easement that heads out there. That was always intended to serve filing one and filing two, but there was a requirement in our land use code when filing two was approved that required the connectivity. So that's what required the wraparound and the second point of access. Our current standards really just address dead end length in rural Larimer County. There's no requirement for infrastructure connectivity in a rural subdivision like this. Only in urban areas is that applied. So for them to come in, what they needed to meet was basically if they were proposing a dead end length of more than 660 feet, which would start at that intersection of Sweetwater and Parkstone Court, they had to build out the roadway to a minimum rural area standard. They had to show that they didn't have any major utility or drainage crossings that would create issues where people wouldn't be able to get in and out in the event of a disaster. And they also, I thought they had provisions that they would be required to both formalize their own road maintenance agreement for filing two and contribute to the filing one's existing road maintenance.
Thank you, colleagues. And maybe a quick follow-up, if I may. And that is, in terms of emergency ingress and egress, maybe you've spoken to this, Stephen. Has that been addressed to the satisfaction of the Berthoud Fire Department?
I believe it has, yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you, colleagues. I think that's all I have. Oh, yeah, Commissioner. Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your questions are prompting me to clarify, and I'm not sure I see this and what's in my packet. But this conversation I just want to clarify, is there only one in and out for egress?
They're under the proposed configuration.
Okay.
I should say, not existing under what's being proposed. Laura, do you mind pulling up the proposed map? So yes, under the proposed configuration, they would only have one point of ingress and egress, the second filing, which would come from the first filing. And then the first filing has one unrestricted point of access and one emergency point of access.
May I ask one more question? So that emergency point of access, is there criteria for how many homes one of those accesses can serve, or how much area? Do we know?
Not to my knowledge in the rural area. I could double check that for you. But no, typically it's looking at maximum distances and requirements, whether or not the actual structures are required to be sprinkled or not. Usually there's not a maximum density, but I can take a look to see if any revisions to the land use code in the last couple of years address that.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I'll also add that all of the homes in the second filing will be sprinkled.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Shattuck McNally, I believe that distance is at least 300 feet. It's a little hard to tell because we don't have the plat overlaid to the aerial photo, the new plat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From the back of the lot before the riparian area?
Yes.
Or the middle, or is it the middle of the river? Because the riparian area is outside of the river, and then we're talking about the riparian area to the back of the lot.
I believe from the back of the lot to the start of the riparian area is approximately 300 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. I don't have any other questions at this time. I believe we can now move into the next phase of our hearing, which is the applicant has an opportunity to present their proposal. Is that person here? Welcome. If you would introduce yourself for the record, and also before you begin, it would be helpful to know how much time you think you'll need for your presentation. Understanding that once you're done, we'll open it up to public comment, and I suggest you be a good listener during the public comment, and then you'll have an opportunity to respond to that public comment. And of course, we've received some written public comment that has prompted us to move this into a discussion item. So please identify yourself and tell us how much time you think you'll need.
I apologize. The mic may be off. Thank you.
Andrew Batson,
Andrew Benson.
and 5 minutes or so should be plenty.
Okay, thank you. And there's certainly some wiggle room. I want to make sure you have ample opportunity to make your case.
Yes, no, I appreciate it. I don't have a formal presentation simply because we received the comments from the neighborhood earlier today, and I actually ran into my good friends who I knew from many years ago when we were first bought the property here in the hallway, and I certainly would have been happy to address these earlier, but since it kind of came about this afternoon, that's the reason. And as you can see, the property was always part of the neighborhood. It isn't a new development. It was the second filing, and I had purchased that at the time, and we were involved with a home building company that was building, that I owned part of, building some of the homes in the current neighborhood, but we were not the developer of the neighborhood. We simply bought the second filing from an investor that bought it. I think it had gone through bankruptcy or foreclosure. So anyway, we look forward to having the second phase be a beautiful addition to the neighborhood. And we absolutely will work with the current HOA. It isn't feasible to even do the second filing without having a great agreement and great working relationship with the HOA and merging the new development in. It was simply the thought that this was just a formality in terms of reducing the number of lots. It certainly isn't a posture that we're not wanting to work with the HOA. Some of their comments regarding property values, I can assure them will be a non-issue. The lot sizes and the back into open space will definitely dictate beautiful custom homes that will be compatible with the current neighborhood. In terms of the access, I'm not an engineer, but I trust all the engineers that have had their hands on this for the last 5 years. I have no idea why it took 5 years, but it's probably my fault for not checking in on my team. But I know that's been looked at heavily. The issue with the original plat was that road would have then been in the floodway, and having a road in the floodway creates all sorts of problems with the rules around that. So, and reducing that obviously from 24 to 16 lots should be a very minimal impact, on actual traffic. If there was any concerns during construction, we'd certainly address those. And before we have any sort of development, I'm kind of the landowner. I owned the home building company that built some of the homes in the first filing. I've since sold that company. That company is interested in purchasing the second filing and developing it, and they're a wonderful custom builder. But until we sort of had this amendment, they weren't ready to proceed. So my thought process was that we have this amendment, reduce the number of lots, and then as part of the development agreement process and the agreement with the HOA, that we'd work out any of the details. Absolutely, we have to contribute to the road maintenance for the first phase and probably some catch up on some deferred maintenance that I'm sure has occurred. And it's in our best interest, of course, to help with landscaping and things like that, since that, filing 1 will be the entrance to filing 2. We're increasing the open space for the overall neighborhood. I chatted just briefly here with one of the homeowners that I knew from before that we would probably work together with the HOA with a farmer that would want to continue to farm that, because there's a substantial amount of open space, which is great for Larimer County, great for the neighborhood, but better to be farmed than to sit there vacant. So I'm sure that the HOA will benefit from that in terms of the maintenance. So really, from the fire access standpoint, that's I think why, as part of the process, we agreed to fire sprinklers in the homes. The whole neighborhood is still a very small neighborhood, even with this addition, and we absolutely look forward to cooperating with the county and the current homeowners in filing 1 to make this a beautiful, successful, second part of the neighborhood. Thank you for your time and your consideration, and we'd love to get this approved simply so we can move to that next phase, which is working with the HOA and working with the builder, developer, and the county to move this forward. Thank you. Are there any questions for me?
One moment, please. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew, right?
Thank you.
Actually, hold on. Let's see if there are any questions for you.
Oh, okay.
Colleagues?
I don't have any at this time. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner.
I know, I'm sorry, I forgot your first name, sorry.
It's Andrew.
Andrew, thank you.
Yes.
You kind of were rushed there at the end about the open space. You said something about farming. Can you go back and clarify that a little bit for me?
Yeah, sure. I noticed one of the comments that we received this afternoon from the filing 1 HOA was, gosh, how do we, what's going to happen with this land? So, it's a, I don't know the exact amount in the second filing that's being added. I think it's around 30 acres of additional open space, which also includes a dedication, I believe, to the county for a future trail along the river. But in terms of that open space, I think the most logical thing to do is, we would certainly work with the HOA to find the land would become dedicated to the HOA as we annex into the HOA, and to find a good trusted farmer, have a good written agreement with them to maintain and farm that land, keep it productive, as opposed to just, empty land. It's currently being farmed, and I'm sure we could continue that and probably do even better than how it's being farmed today.
So are you looking to put a conservation easement on that for agriculture, or are you just looking to make that a private open space for the HOA? I'm not quite sure what you're.
It's a great idea, actually. About 5 years ago, I talked to somebody with the state about a conservation easement. It probably isn't a bad thing to look at, but the current plan is that it's just simply Tract A, HOA-owned open space. So,
okay,
yeah.
because county does conservation easements, so I'm just curious about that, because it's when you say open space, people think that means a certain thing, but it sounds like it would be private space for.
That's currently the plan, although I don't know that that precludes conversations. If that would be something that the county was interested in for a conservation easement, that might be nice. And you have a lot of space right across the street, right? You have a large county-owned land or conservation easement, I believe, just to the west. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Andrew, for our clerk and recorder, would you please spell your last name, B-A-T?
Yes, of course. Batson, B-A-T-S-O-N.
Thank you. So I would just encourage you to listen well to the comments, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to respond in more detail to some of the very specific comments that we received from the first filing HOA folks.
Yes, absolutely. And my intent was not that this was an end, that this was the beginning. So, of course, we will absolutely have to work out and want to have a great agreement with the HOA in terms of their concerns. Certainly, our plan all along.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Appreciate the presentation. We'll now move into the public comment portion of the hearing. And first, an opportunity for folks in person to offer their comments, and then if there are folks online, it would help me as the facilitator of this gathering if folks who are interested in commenting, if you could raise your hand. So far, 2 folks, and there might be some folks. Okay, let me suggest, please, respectfully, that 3 minutes would for your public comments each. Well, that's typically how we do it. So, who would like to come on up first? We welcome your input. Please identify yourself for the record, and if you're affiliated with any organization. And again, welcome to the hearing.
Hello, my name is Brett Floyd, and I am the property owner to the south of this development. And first of all, I am wondering why we need more $1 million plus homes built, number one, when we have many facilities already open. And I am also concerned of the damage it does to land. I have, from this second building that they just completed up there, I have picked up tons of garbage and such that has blown down into my property. And the noise that comes from these new houses, and everybody has to show off their $1 million house with a few kilowatts of lighting every evening. And I would just say that, it'd be better production as arable farmland, which it is right now, because we do need food, and we cannot eat food from where there are houses. And also, there's the thing that this is a semi-arid part of the country, and there is no water. And it's also this idea of having a trail down by the river, portion of which the land I own adjacent to the river and in there, I am worried about whatever people are going to be kind of wandering through there, leaving their debris behind them. So I would seriously like to not see this developed and see it put into production as farmland as it once was. If people would like city lights and like congestion of houses, well, they could move to a city and not complain about farming happening in their backyards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. There was a second person. Come on up, please.
So my name is Michael Paulus. I live in the first filing of Riverside Farms. So my questions are really kind of a follow-on to the 6 questions that we proposed this morning, as well as some engineering questions that I don't know that Andrew has personnel or the fire department has personnel available to answer. But I did notice that the water line is being increased from a 6-inch to an 8-inch to support the new second filing, but it's only being increased from 8-inch down into the second filing and not out from County Road 17. So the question I have is, there's a reason, obviously, they've increased that line. What's it do to our water pressure and water services in filing 1? And then also the fire department, there was some information in here on 2,000 GPM flow requirement that Little Thompson Water District cannot meet, which requires the homes being constructed down in the second filing to be internally sprinkled. But I'm worried about this sentence that's inside of the fire department's response that the last sentence says, let me paraphrase it, fire protection shall be provided on the premises on which facilities, buildings, or portions of buildings are hereafter constructed or moved into within the jurisdiction. So my question to Berthoud Fire is, if I go to sell my home in the first filing, am I there bound to have to put in a fire protection system because it's now being moved into? So potential impact to the 21 homeowners that live in the first filing. And then traffic access, Andrew responded that they're willing to put in a temporary construction road out to County Road 17. I believe that should be a requirement for this construction to happen. Our roadways in the first filing are private roadways that will then extend down into the second filing, but they cannot take the heavy hauling that is required to put in roadways and civil utilities for that second filing. So there needs to be a temporary access, construction access. I think those were my major concerns.
Thank you. Is it Mr. Michael
Paulus, Paulus,
Paul?
US.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Colleagues, do you have any? Well, the same invitation extends to the other person, Mr. Floyd, but any questions? And actually, I'm hoping that staff was also listening. I'm curious to better understand about what the Berthoud Fire Protection District is requiring as far as water flow and water tap fees. And I'm also interested to understand the specific comments that were made in the HOA document that reference specific pages and how we may make sure that certainly verbal and a gentleman's agreement are all well and good, but I think things in writing are even better, perhaps. And I'm wondering if you've given thought to if we need to add some additional, perhaps, conditions of approval if we move forward with this. And I know one of this, I think I heard that this idea of a temporary access road, which was suggested by the applicant, should that be a condition of approval, for example?
And part of that road currently exists to access the pump house, the sewage ejection pump house that is in that south half of the property.
Okay.
So it'd be a very easy thing to provide and take the pressure off of the filing one homes.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Mr. Floyd, I think we're done. Please forgive me.
I would just like to make just a short comment.
Well, but you've had your opportunity, and I'm happy to speak with you offline. And again, I would just offer before we check on the internet, perhaps recognizing and acknowledging the comments made by the previous individual, Mr. Brett Floyd. Points well taken. In the end, part of it is, people have property rights and they own the property. And part of how this process works is through a land use code and, making sure that we're protecting individual property rights at the same time respecting community rights. I mean, that's the purpose of having some kind of a framework to make informed decisions. And while we may want to all make sure that we have productive land, stay productive, ultimately the property owner has the ability to decide what they want to do with their land. Well, that was an editorial comment I typically don't offer. So let's go. Shalena, are there folks online who wish to offer public comment on this particular application?
So all the folks online, if you would like to make public comment on this agenda topic, please use the raise hand function. Yes, we have one. Pam Phillips, I will allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and say your name for the record.
Thanks, Shalena. Welcome, Pam. Can you hear us?
Pam, I can see that you're still, there you go.
Okay. Did I get it?
Yep, got it. Would you please introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, I'm Pam Phillips, a resident of the first community, as it is Mr. Paulus. I just have a question about the elevation of that. It appears to me on one of the that Miss Cullerton, is it Cullerton? I'm sorry if I got that wrong. One of the drawings that was shown, it looked like the houses to the farthest south, it looked like those are still, part of it is still in the floodplain. And so I'm wondering, and maybe I'm incorrect, but I was hoping to understand that. I assumed the blue was floodplain on the drawings we were shown.
Ms. Phillips, I thank you. We'll make sure that we ask Laura after the public comment period to respond to your questions regarding the blue, the color scheme, and the houses on the southern perimeter and whether they actually lie in the floodplain. So we're not going to respond to questions at this moment.
Okay.
But please stay on. But are there other comments and insights that you have, ma'am?
No, I just have the same concerns about the access, the temporary access for the heavy trucks and building materials being brought in. But my question, just so you can discuss later on that elevation, if they're going to have to bring in dirt to elevate those homes at all.
Okay.
That's just something I'd like to know. So.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Is there anything else? You have a little bit more time?
No, sir.
Okay, please stick around and we'll do our best to get answers to your questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Shalena, are there other folks online who wish to participate in the public comment portion?
If there's anyone else online who would like to provide public comment for this agenda topic, please use the raise hand function now. Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised.
All right, then. It looks like we can close the public comment portion of this hearing. Thank you all for your participation. We all took notes as best as we can. At this time, we have what we refer to as the, quote, rebuttal phase or response phase, and that's the opportunity for Mr. Batson. Andrew, you're back on. Hoping you can give some specific responses, and if you're feeling able to, comment on some of the specific things that were raised in the HOA letter, sir.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Again, Andrew Batson. And we did not have our engineer here today since it was a consent item, so I can't speak a ton about civil engineering, but I can definitely know that a lot of effort went into the civil engineering to ensure that the building sites are not in the floodplain. And I'm sure the county staff engineering can verify that and will hold us accountable to that. I think the idea of the access road sounds great to me. I don't know unless the county transportation has any issue with that. Sounds like a very simple solution to a valid concern, and we'd be happy to address that. And then, we have to have an agreement in terms of annexing into the HOA, and that agreement will contain the provisions such as capital contributions and road maintenance and things like that. So I think that's a little outside the scope of what this hearing's about, but happy to go on record to state that we will absolutely work with the HOA and we will absolutely have an agreement with the HOA. I think, again, and to Mr. Floyd's concerns, the development was approved over 20 years ago, I believe, and it was more lots than it is now. So we certainly are not creating something new here. We're just kind of revising the number of lots and the layout. So appreciate the concerns and the all well taken, and we look forward to working with the HOA to keep everybody happy and be great neighbors.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm just going to say that presuming that your comment, which will confirm with our folks, that none of the homes are in the floodplain, also responds to an issue raised by, I believe, Ms. Phillips about needing to put dirt in to elevate homes.
Yes, so it's a good point. In fact, we could have kept the original plat, and it would have just required raising, bringing in a lot of fill and raising the homes out of the floodplain, which seemed more than I felt. I'm not a real sophisticated developer. It seemed a little complicated to me, and so we went with the revised plat. Every subdivision has some cut and fill because, of course, you need storms to streets to drain properly and water lines and things like that. But I don't think we're artificially bringing in a significant amount of dirt to try to raise the lots out of the floodplain. That's not to say that part of a lot could be in the floodplain, but not the building envelope. I believe. I don't know specifically, but I do know that the county has an excellent engineering team with that because all of this started because of the floodplain. So I'm sure that it's been looked at by people that know much more than I do about the floodplain. But I don't believe that there's any. We're not like bringing in 10 feet of dirt to try to build a molehill to build the houses on or anything like that. So.
Thank you. Colleagues, do you have any questions for the applicant at this time?
And in terms of the trash, we were not building it. We haven't built any homes out there for over 4 years. So I apologize about the trash and Mr. Floyd. It wasn't from us, but we'll be very careful if we are building.
So, so this was approved, but was there ever some kind of discussion or agreement about the HOA or the shared maintenance at all in all these years? Seems like there's been some discussion on that.
No, and it's probably my fault. I looked at the data on this thing and thought 19. How on earth could this have a case number of 19? The background was that I had a small custom home building company, and there was some vacant lots in Riverside, and we bought those lots as a home builder. We didn't do any development, so we had nothing to do with the formation of the HOA or any of the development. And we bought those lots and built some houses. The investor that owned those lots also owned the Filing 2 land and offered to sell it to us. And I bought the Filing 2 land with another investor, not through the home building company. We've just been sitting on it. And then when the floodplain stuff got remapped, and so we tried to contract with the original engineer and then brought in a second engineer because the first one's computer had crashed and the files were so old he couldn't open them. So kind of drug on. I knew a lot of the HOA members from when we built homes and built some wonderful homes for some great families in there. It just hadn't gotten in my mind to the point yet that, we need to sit down with the HOA and talk about specifics. It was more of an engineering exercise in my mind. And so the first thing when I saw the email today with the comments from the HOA, you dummy, I should have reached out sooner. I thought everybody would be happy to have the number of lots reduced and also to have more people contributing to the HOA and the road maintenance. And I know that'll be the case. I made a brief conversation as we walked in, and I'm sure we'll have a great relationship. But that's the background and the history with that.
Okay, I think the rest of my questions will be for staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. We now have an opportunity to ask additional questions of staff, and then from there we'll go into what we call the deliberation phase before making a decision on this proposal. Colleagues, Commissioner Stevens, let's start with you. Do you have particular questions for Laura and her team?
Well, And, I appreciate Mr. Batson answering some of the questions, because I don't know that all of that is necessarily relevant to what we're discussing here. I mean, we're discussing the reducing the number of lots and the right-of-way vacation. So any agreements that would need to be made with the HOA with regard to anything wouldn't be pertinent or appropriate to put in conditions. Is that correct?
Good question.
I think that, Frank Haug from the county attorney's office, I think you're correct. You have to focus on the criteria in front of you for this particular application. What would need to happen if this were to get approved, they would need to negotiate and go through a second development agreement process. In the past, in sort of similar type situations, what we've done is required that as a condition of approval, they must enter into the development agreement, and that the development agreement must account for a proportional share of whatever their costs are. If I'm tracking sort of where you're going, there's this road that's already, I think, maintained and by the HOA. And so in the past, what we've done is had a condition of approval that they enter into a development agreement, and that the development agreement ensures that they pay whatever their share of the traffic costs are, so that the wear and tear on the road that they're contributing, they're paying for.
Thank you. And then I guess, with regard to the questions around the Berthoud Fire, they were a referral agency, and the right-of-way vacation includes a criteria on the Berthoud Fire District. So potentially some of those questions might be, did we get a report from Berthoud Fire? I don't remember seeing this.
It's page 27 in your packet.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yes, I did see it. And so they are agreeing to, have the fire sprinkler system. I guess there was some questions about the water pressure. That feels like it probably. I don't know that piece was addressed by Berthoud Fire. Is that right?
But again, they can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think generally with these things, you have to have number one, you can just say you have to be compliant with whatever the fire district's requirements are, so you don't really need to get into the details of all of it.
Sure.
They're going to have to comply with whatever the requirements are anyway. And so I think
that will happen when the houses are built and when the subdivision is built.
That's right. I mean, you could put a condition in here to say you must comply with all the fire district's requirements, because they'll have their fire code. I think the answer is that generally, as I've seen it in the past, if there's a pipe that's big enough around such that there's a water not a water hydrant in a certain distance away, they don't make you get a sprinkler system. But if they have one that's not of a certain volume, then they make you put in sprinkler systems instead. So I think sometimes when I read this letter, it looks like if you can't get the sufficient fire hydrants and the water pressure, then everybody's got to put in sprinkler systems. But really, you can just say you must comply with the fire district's requirements.
And I'll add, condition number 3 reads, all homes shall be equipped with a residential fire sprinkler system or equivalent to the satisfaction of Berthoud Fire Protection District. And that only applies to the second filing. It won't affect the homes in the first filing.
Okay. Yeah, and there was, I think somebody, at least the HOA letter might have asked if there was any additional costs, but those costs would be borne by the person who bought the home and had that additional sprinkler system. So,
yes,
so it really
correct.
is pretty much covered in that. I think there were just questions about their own, water pressure going down, and I mean, that is unclear whether that would happen. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally, questions for staff?
Yeah, I do. And, Commissioner Stevens, you make a good point. I know we're following the right criteria, but I also afraid we're approving a development that's going to have conflicts. And that's why I think I just want to ask those questions and get a feel for the flavor. Ms. Colton, you said something, Colton, you said something about it won't impact the filing, the fire risk, conditions of this one won't impact the first filing?
So one of the neighbors had suggested that if he sold his home, he would have to put in a fire sprinkler, but that would not be the case for this condition. It would only apply to the homes that haven't been built yet in the second filing. Someone selling their home wouldn't necessarily have to go in and put a fire sprinkler in just because of this amended plat.
Okay. And Frank, I was curious to go back to your comment about we would, if we have to, if we want to add a condition, but do you feel like the third condition in the recommendations would adequately cover what was in the letter, what you stated? We should have the
It seems to me it doesn't address the water pressure issue that was highlighted in the Berthoud Fire Protection District letter.
Right. I mean, the condition number 3 that's in there right now, it just says that you either have to have sprinklers or some alternative at the discretion of the fire department. It doesn't address this other issue. I think that's right. Which you could. I mean, part of the approval needs to, the applicant has to demonstrate there's adequate water to supply to the new, and I think we have a condition in there that says they must provide adequate water, don't we?
it just says infrastructure, and I was wondering if that is it adequate water and infrastructure. That was some of that, since you're going there, I'm going to ask that question.
You could also, I mean, you can add a condition if you want to say cannot decrease the water pressure. You could add something like that to it to say cannot cause harm to the existing water line or something like that.
I sort of like what was suggested earlier, and that is, I don't know whether it means amending the condition number 3, but that they are required to uphold all of the comments made by the Berthoud Fire Protection District, which is having to do with the sprinklers in the second filing, which is having to do with adequate water pressure, water flow. That's my opinion. And I don't know if we agree that's an easier way to go, whether that would be an add-on or possibly a modification of number 3.
I think either way is fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also might still want to add number 5, if we are doing this, to add adequate water pressure. Just infrastructure is sometimes a broad term, but I'm curious. You made a comment before, Frank, about in the development agreement, talking about coming to terms with that. I hate to not have something enforceable to make sure that discussion and that agreement happens. Is that appropriate?
Well, there's a condition number 4 right now that it requires them to have an amended development agreement. To the extent that there are specific things that you want to make sure that development agreement covers, you could add that into that
In there.
condition number 4.
And does that include the construction road access?
And you'd need engineering probably to comment on the feasibility of that, but you could, assuming that that's feasible, you could add that in there.
Can I ask engineering if that's feasible, Mr. Rothwell or Mr. Sheldon?
So that's something that would require a temporary access off of the county road, and I have not discussed that with any of our access and right-of-way folks. That's something that I'd really like to run by them before putting that burden on them. Yes, we have run into instances in the past where we have allowed for temporary access for construction purposes, but it becomes very difficult because developments like these, the home builders, these lots might build out over 2 years, it might build out over 10 years. So how long do you leave that temporary access on the county right into the county right of way? And then as new owners do move into these lots, they start to think of that as a permanent access, and it gets really hard to close it down the road.
Okay.
I do believe that it could be constructed. It will be crossing a couple drainages, so they would need the engineer to design it. But I just haven't had an opportunity to talk to the right-of-way group.
Anything else?
I don't think so right now, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Question I have is regarding some of the issues that were raised in the HOA letter. It seems to me, in particular, at least condition number 2 addresses some of those issues. Are you able or comfortable responding to the current conditions of approval? And we've been discussing the water issues, the fire protection district. Do you feel like they adequately or address the key issues that have been raised?
I would say so, and I think the amended development agreement would also address some of those concerns as well.
Thank you. And I would also offer on the condition number 4 amended development agreement, as I read this thing, there has to be a deliberative process to come up with that agreement, but that ultimately it would come back before the Board of County Commissioners no later than February of 2025, and that's what it reads here, and that would give us an opportunity to review the details of that and offer feedback and approve. Or, I mean, could one add, once that process has been undertaken and it comes before us, is one of the options to add to that development agreement, or is it?
Typically, what we do with the development agreements is they come before you on Tuesday mornings in the consent
right.
agenda. And so you could pull it from there and you could,
Okay.
but it's really viewed more almost like a contractual negotiation between us and the developer. So you could, my suggestion is to the extent there are specific things you want to make sure are in the development agreement, that those would be sort of highlighted now. We do these development agreements regularly, and they cover, roads and the infrastructure and all that stuff. But it's not another public hearing like this.
No, I appreciate that, Frank. And you're reminding me that just recently, within the last couple of weeks, we had an amended development review agreement that was on our consent agenda for another proposal. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, colleagues? Or otherwise, I think we can move. Yes, Jenny, please.
I just wanted to circle back to answer I think it was Ms. Phillips online, the question that she asked about showing the lots in the floodplain. The illustration that Laura shared was the previous approved plat, and so it was illustrating where those lots were in the floodplain, whereas they're no longer in the floodplain now. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for circling back. And therefore, those of us who are not engineers, can we assume that none of the houses would be required to be, quote, elevated and require fill dirt?
I hate to ask you of this, Jenny, but can you share what you just stated? My understanding was, at least a while back, that lots 35 and 36 did have an encroachment into the flood fringe for a portion of them. I'm not sure if that's the map that you're referencing.
I was just merely trying to point out that we were looking at the prior arrangement of lots in the illustration, not the current. So there could be that fringe encroachment.
Okay. Yes, there is a minor encroachment on lots 35 and 36. And I did not see on the plat that either lot did include a building envelope. So my understanding is they would be able to build anywhere on those lots. And if they did want to build in that section that it has the flood fringe encroaching onto it, they would need to elevate and go through a floodplain development permit. There is an opportunity, though, I don't know if there's an opportunity for the applicant to propose building envelopes, since he mentioned it in his presentation, though, outside of those floodplain limits, the flood fringe limits.
Wouldn't details like that go into the development review agreement?
Building envelopes are typically added on the plat, and it would require a public hearing amended plat process. But like Steven said, if they were to propose building within the flood fringe area, we do have our floodplain team who reviews those permits, and they have the proper process to make sure that they're mitigating the flood area.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Just curious for staff, since it's still up, why there wasn't maybe proposed building envelopes or discussion for that, especially knowing the history there and having some of those lots, making sure that maybe those lots had some restrictions not to build in the flood fringe. Was that not a consideration or a discussion or something that was considered? I'm just curious.
I,
Since there's only what you said to two, I'm just curious. So
Yeah, so our current floodplain code and previous floodplain code in which this was approved and in which this proposal came in back in 2019 doesn't give us the authority to say that lots have to be removed from the floodplain in its entirety. It does allow us to require them to be outside of the floodway, but the fringe itself is generally a negotiation between staff and the developer. Of course, our intent is trying to get them all properties to be removed in their entirety from the fringe, but there are cases where there are fringe encroachments into these properties.
but if I'm assuming those two lots, the fringe would be on kind of the back part of the lot, and what could you not encourage the building envelope to be up out of the fringe? That I'm just curious with the. Sorry, I'm just trying to think about further down the road if we have issues and someone builds and then because this has happened in my experience as commissioner, and it's like, well, the county approved us to be there. They should have never let them build in the flood fringe or floodway. So I'm just curious about that.
I can speak to one limited side. Obviously, there are several aspects to adding a building envelope, which go to the minimum size in which that building envelope needs to be. I do know, can you pull open the plat for me? And would you mind zooming in to lots 35 and 36? So apologies, I'm not set up to share my screen, but lot 35, that triangular wedge in the southeast corner there, essentially that wedge falls in the floodway if you were to just follow that southwestern property line over the lot, and then it takes a small corner of the southern portion of lot 36. I don't personally see that there would be any issues with adding a building envelope on lot 36. I do not know about minimum building envelope sizes though for 35, whether or not if you excluded that wedge that the lot would be big enough. I guess I would ask my planning counterparts on that one.
I'll add one thing with including building envelopes. If someone ever wants to go in and change them, which we are seeing a lot nowadays, it does require a public hearing to go in and amend that. And so we kind of, in more recent developments, I feel like we're deterring away from building envelopes. Just kind of wanted to add that. And
It does sound like there is room to build on the lot, likely without infringing on the floodway fringe, but we could add a condition just stating that no building could be built within the portion of the lot within the floodplain fringe. We wouldn't have to require a building envelope per se.
I was just going to add, the board can provide whatever conditions it wants. You could add a condition to say, on lots 35 and 36, you can't construct within the flood fringe. But I will say also, as they mentioned before, any construction on there is going to have to go through the building permit process. It's going to have to go through the flood review process. They're going to have to comply and not build something in the flood fringe unless it meets all the regulations anyway. So they're not going to be able to build in there unless it meets all of the FEMA requirements anyway.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank and Laura and Stephen. I think unless there are other questions, we can move into our deliberation phase of the hearing. Well, Commissioner Stevens, would you like to begin that?
Sure, happy to. Well, thank you for everyone who came today to speak and for the dialogue. I appreciate that. I'm inclined to support this application, but I'm also very open to adding to the conditions that are listed, because I heard a couple things, and I'm going to ask staff, I guess, before I suggest this, but we could say that the development agreement had to include a road maintenance agreement. Could we say that? Okay, I think that might give some assurance to the HOA that they're going to be, that those costs would be shared. And then I didn't know if we wanted to, all infrastructure is, when we're talking about infrastructure in the fifth condition, I'd be fine with saying that, that the water pressure, wouldn't be decreased for the first filing. Did you say we could say something like that? So I guess those were a couple things that I thought we could address in the conditions that might be helpful. And then I heard from my colleagues that they might want to say something a little more, something about Berthoud Fire Protection District, beyond the fire sprinkler system, that they were following all rules or all suggestions by Berthoud Fire Protection. I mean, it seems like 3 covers it, but if somebody feels like it doesn't, then I'm willing to entertain other other conditions. But with those 2 conditions, I'm fine to approve this application.
Thanks.
I will say that I think it does meet the criteria that's listed here, and that it just remind us that we are looking at the amended plat criteria and the right-of-way vacation review criteria.
Thank you. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do feel for the right-of-way and vacation review criteria, I do think they have met all the conditions and have addressed some concerns. And then the amended plat review criteria, I do think since they're decreasing and getting, there's not a chance for building the flood fringe that addresses some of my concerns, but I do feel I would like to add to 3, 4, and 5 with the 3, and that's pretty much repeating what my colleague said, but I do think it would be nice to, along with that and with what's there, but just add and other requirements suggested or recommended by the Berthoud Fire District. So it's not just the residential, but the other requirements in that letter. And then I do agree with my colleague that I do think it'd be important to address the road sharing agreements. In the number 4, because I think it's better to be clear, since this is an older development and sounds like there's been maybe some miscommunication or not continued communication. I think it's better to be clear, to have that met and have that discussed, that it's clear that should have to be part of the development agreement. And then I just, I think also just address the neighbors in filing 1 is to make sure that they're not impacted by this second filing, and so I'd like to make sure that it is added that to show that water pressure, water delivery for filing 1 is not impacted. It can be shown it's not going to be impacted or will not be impacted. Is that clear, or is that? And then just curious, Frank. With the I mean, I think it is a legit concern with only one in and out ingress in this discussion about the construction road. I mean, I can see if this is going to be a long time and you have lots of cars coming out. Is that, I mean, it sounds like I don't have clear feedback or information from engineering. So is that something that can be I mean, is that something that has to be decided now, or what is your recommendation? I mean, I'm just curious about that because I do think that's a legitimate concern to have years of big trucks, and then also it's also extra wear and tear on the roads that the other filing has to, because the roads could get worn down and then everyone has to pay, but it still just seems like if we can be proactive and avoid that wear and tear, if it's possible. I'm just curious about that.
Look, maybe let me make sure I'm understanding your question, which is, I think what you're saying is if down the road, engineering, maybe as part of the development agreement said it would be safe or we would be in favor of putting in the temporary access, could we make that decision based off of engineering's recommendation later? I think we probably could. So I think where you're going with that is saying a condition that engineering consider whether an additional temporary access would be appropriate to allow for construction traffic.
Yes, exactly, because I do think that is a legitimate concern, and I wasn't sure if we had to decide or put that in today, or if that's something that could be part of the development agreement. And I'd like to have that also added just to kind of understand that. I think it is a legitimate concern, and I do think it would cause extra wear and tear. So if my colleagues would be open, I just think at least to have the engineering have that extra information since we don't have it today.
That seems reasonable to me. I don't know if Stephen wants to comment on that, but I think you could do that.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely reasonable to me. I think my only question is, in the event that, say, our access team or our county engineer did not like that idea, what would you want an alternative to be contemplated?
That's the word. I think you just say either you get the alternative access, otherwise they just got to pay their share of any damage they do to the road.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be, I think that is reasonable. I hope my colleagues will consider that. Thank you.
So I'm also inclined to support the application regarding the right-of-way vacation, as well as the amended plat for the second filing. I do believe it meets the review criteria that are before us, and supporting the recommendation from our community development staff. A reminder that we had the 4 original conditions of approval, and then today we received the memo that adds a 5th condition of approval, which again I think addresses some of these issues. So that we need to make sure that that's included in the motion if we are move to approve. So there are those 5 conditions of approval. And then beyond that, what's been suggested, I'm hoping someone can summarize this or put it on the screen, because I'm not exactly sure if we go down that road, how we're going to word that or make sure it's clear on what we're considering.
I could make an effort at summarizing that if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and one thought on the issue of the Berthoud Fire Protection District, it seems to me if our intent there is to ensure that this proposal is complying with their comments and requirements in the letter that they sent on June 13th, I think we can just say that a condition of approval is to comply with all of the requirements, comments, and requirements described in the, of the Berthoud Fire Protection District. That's my thought on that one. But
that's fine. That makes sense.
Hope that makes it a tiny. So what about the rest of this stuff? Who's going to?
So that would be an amendment to condition number 3 that would say must comply with all other requirements of Berthoud Fire from the letter on June 13th. The other change would be to condition number 4 which would say an amended development agreement shall be provided for review and approval no later than February 12th. The amended development agreement shall account for or shall ensure that the development of Phase 2 pays an equal and proportional share of the road based on the traffic for Phase 2. The third thing was a condition, which would be condition 6, that would say that the water pressure or the delivery of water to the existing home shall not be affected by the build-out of Phase 2.
And the amended plat agreement to, if engineering comes
Oh.
back with a recommendation for temporary access for construction.
Right.
Thank you.
To complicate this a little bit more, I'd like to propose changing the date in number 4 to March 23rd of 2025. This date was written based on the previous hearing date, which is 6 months out. So we typically give 6 months. So we'd like to change that to March 23rd.
So before I ask, I think Commissioner Stevens to offer a motion.
Well, let me maybe try one more time I can work out the specific language later because we're going to come in and have a findings and resolution, but I want to make sure I have it accurate.
Well, and I want to understand when, I think some of your language was something about ensuring that the parties pay an equal share. Isn't that a little bit, who determines what an equal share is?
Well, and I mean, we can phrase it how you would like, but what happens typically in these circumstances, and Stephen can correct me because I'm not the engineer, but they calculate based on a home how many traffic trips are going to come in and out every day from a home. I think it's 8. Is that right? 10? So every home you build gets allocated a certain amount of traffic trips. And then when you're in the construction phase, they can do traffic counters or different things to ensure that so they calculate proportional shares of these things regularly. They have equations to do that. I don't know how they do it, but they do it. And so we can figure out, I think, the numbers. It's just how you want to phrase that. That's my understanding.
Well, and the other piece of that caught my attention was ensuring that the homes in the first filing would not be impacted. How can a development review agreement ensure that?
I think the goal, as I understand it of the board, is to make sure that when they build out this new one, that the water pressure in the existing ones doesn't go down.
Or is that? So I think there we need to be very specific.
Right, and that the not as part of the development agreement, but just as a condition of the approval of this, a condition would be that the water pressure and delivery to the existing homes is not affected.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. So Frank, you want to take another shot at the language? And it looks like we're not changing conditions 1 and 2. Is that correct?
1 and 2 would stay the same.
Thank you.
3 would be modified to say that they must comply with the other conditions and recommendations of the Berthoud Fire District as of that letter from June 13th. Number 4 would have language added to it that would say that the development agreement shall require that Phase 2 pays its proportional share of the costs for road maintenance. That's simpler, maybe. And then 5 is the same. 6 would say that the build-out of Phase 2 shall not affect the water pressure or delivery to the existing homes. And then we would have, again in number 4, language that talks about engineering shall review and, if appropriate, provide for temporary construction access as part of the development agreement.
Thank you. All right then. Commissioner Stevens, you want to try?
Yeah, do I have to repeat everything you said, or I can just say the okay. Let me find this. Sorry. I move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the Riverside Farm second filing right-of-way vacation file number 19, land 3877. And I move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the Riverside Farm second filing amended plat, file number 19, land 3877, subject to the conditions as outlined, that have been outlined in our packet, and what our attorney just added to those conditions, and authorize the chair to sign the findings and resolutions.
I appreciate that. I just offer that. There are four conditions that were in the packet. The fifth one, which is not being changed, was from a memo. I don't know if that's getting into, if that's necessary. But I mean, basically, I think we can speak to the conditions of approval in the packet, the one that was added to the packet, and then based on the amendments or the conditions that were discussed at this meeting.
Yeah, that's right. Do you want me to restate it in any kind of way?
No, I think it's sufficiently clear.
Okay.
Additional conditions.
And that's a good clarification.
Thank you.
And that covers the complying with the birth and fire requirements, the whole lot?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Okay. So, and I want to acknowledge Ms. Phillips has her hand raised, but just want to acknowledge that, but we're well past public comment at this time. So there is, yes, Mr. Haug.
I apologize.
No need
And
to.
the other thing was that the date currently, the condition says February something, and there was a suggestion that be moved to March. What, March? March 23rd. I didn't know if the board wanted to move that or keep it the same.
Yeah, yes.
To move it to March.
Yeah, I'll add that to my my awkward motion that we would also move the date to March 23rd, 2025.
Thank you.
And that's in condition of approval number 4.
Right.
Okay. So there is a motion before us as with additional conditions of approval that we've been discussing. Colleagues, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0 unanimously. I'm sure staff will work with you, Mr. Batson, to make sure all this is clear as we move forward in the development review agreement process. I'd like to suggest that we take a 5-minute break. I know we've only been at this for an hour and a half, but I think a 5-minute break for a stretching and if folks need to use the bathroom. All right, thank you all very much. Thanks for your patience. We took a bit of a break from the previous discussion item. We are now on the, well, I would pronounce it Bella Vista Resort Cottages Administrative Special Review, file number 22-zone 3344. And we have Ms. Samantha Lasher who will present.
All right, thank you, Commissioner, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Samantha Lasher. I'm a planner too with the county, and I'll be presenting the Bella Vista Resort Cottages Administrative Special Review application, file number 22 Zone 3344. The subject property is located at 6600 Highway 7 in Estes Park. It's located approximately 0.8 miles northeast of the intersection of Highway 7 and Longs Peak Road. The property was formally addressed as 102 Levings Way. However, the owners recently applied for a new access point directly off Highway 7, so the address was changed to accommodate that new access. And it should be noted that the access to Levings Way will be closed. Even though the property is addressed with an Estes Park address, it is located outside of the Estes Valley. It's zoned forestry and is just over 8 acres. The applicant and the property manager is Trish Ronan. She's part of Ronan Property Management. Her office is located just off Highway 34 in Loveland, which is approximately 35 minutes from the subject property. The owners are Dan and Kelly Hurd. As mentioned before, the access for the property is now off Highway 7. The property is served by an on-site septic system and an on-site well, and is within the Allens Park Fire Protection District. The request before you tonight is an administrative special review for resort cottages to be rented on a short-term basis, which would be located in 2 existing detached dwellings on the property. There would be a total of 4 bedrooms and 1 additional sleeping area between the 2 dwellings for a maximum of 10 guests. There is a 3rd dwelling on the property, which is not part of this application. So just a little bit more background on this property and the request itself. As I mentioned, the property does contain 3 existing dwellings. The forestry zone district does not currently allow for more than 1 primary residence. However, all 3 cabins were built before there were land use code or permitting requirements. So there was a non-conforming determination issued by the director in 2021 that deemed all dwellings legal non-conforming, meaning they can continue to exist on the property and be used as residences. However, the owners are applying for this resort cottage application to convert 2 of the dwellings to be used as resort cottages, and then the 3rd dwelling would be used just for the private use of the owners. And as you can see on the site plan, the main cabin right here would be one of the resort cottages, as well as this smaller guest cabin. And then the cabin that's furthest east or furthest south would be the private use for the owners. So what exactly is a resort cottage or resort lodge? So the land use code defines it as a building or group of buildings under single management and ownership. There could be multiple rooms or units, and it's for temporary rental to transient guests. So essentially a resort cottage is very similar to a short-term rental, but it could include multiple dwellings or multiple units. So because this application would be renting out 2 separate dwellings to rental guests, we would classify it as a resort cottage use. The applicant indicated that there will be no on-site property manager, just a property manager located within an hour. So therefore, staff determined that even though this is a resort cottages application in name, it must meet all of the short-term rental standards and criteria, and it must receive administrative special review approval. It should also be noted that this application was submitted in 2022, so all of the definitions, standards, and criteria that you all are reading in the staff report, as well as noted in the presentation, are all from the land use code that was applicable in 2022. These are a few site photos. So the photo on the left is of the main cabin on site. The photo on the right is a picture of the 2 smaller cabins. In the photo on the right, the cabin on the left would be one that's rented to guests, and then the one on the right would be for the private use of the owners. A courtesy neighbor notification of the property was, or excuse me, of the project was mailed to 11 surrounding property owners. To date, staff has received comments from a total of 13 community members. 10 are in opposition, 3 are in support. All of these comments are included in the packet as attachment E, as well as in the provided memo that was sent today. The applicant has also provided multiple responses to community member concerns, included as attachment F and also in the memo provided today. In reviewing a proposed administrative special review application, the director shall consider the general review criteria found in Article 638D of the Code, as well as the specific administrative special review criteria as seen here on the screen, found in Article 643D of the Land Use Code. This criteria has been addressed in detail in the staff report. As mentioned, even though this is a resort cottages application, it must meet all applicable short-term rental standards. Because the applicants are requesting a maximum of 10 guests, the small short-term rental standards would apply as seen here on the screen and in the staff report. The administrative special review process does authorize the director to approve applications in which all criteria are met or there are no issues. However, if the director determines that there is something complex or a possible negative impact of the application on the county, she could escalate it to the Board of County Commissioners for a decision. The director did do this in this case because of the concerns presented by community members. So staff has found that the proposed administrative special review for the Bella Vista Resort Cottages application meets the short-term rental standards found in Article 335B2, but only meets 3 out of the 5 criteria in Article 643D. Staff does not have a conclusive determination on criteria 1 and 2 of 643D. Therefore, staff is not making a specific recommendation on this application and has provided all information for the county commissioners to base their decision. Therefore, there are 2 suggested motions for the commissioners to consider. There's a denial motion here on the screen, and there is also an approval suggested motion with 19 recommended conditions of approval, as seen here on the screen and also in the staff report. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Samantha. Colleagues, do you have any questions for Samantha Lasher? Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Samantha, I just want to kind of go back to expand and clarify the November 1st, all the way from 2022, from the Department of Water Resources, that last paragraph about the water supply and the temporary rental uses and having a different commercial exempt well permit instead. Can you expand on that a little bit and let me know kind of, was that addressed or expand on that that concern, those stated conditions or recommendations? It's on page 610.
Thank you. I can pull it up here for everyone to see. And this was in their comments specifically, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the letter dated on November 1st, 2022.
Sure. Perfect. Yeah, so I'm happy to clarify that. So the Division of Water Resources wanted to make clear that as long as the 2 dwellings that are part of this resort cottage application are rented to one short-term rental party together, then they would not have to apply for a commercial well permit. They could use the property as a resort cottage under their current residential permit. If they were to rent the 2 dwellings to separate short-term rental parties or rent one to one party and use the other for their own personal use, that would require them to apply for a commercial well permit. And so in talking to the applicants, they are willing to only rent out the 2 dwellings to one short-term rental party at once so that they can continue to use their current well permit, and this has been made a condition of approval.
And I saw that condition of approval, and how easily is that to be enforced?
I can let Alan Key speak to that with the Code Compliance Division, but essentially we would require them to maintain that on their advertising to make clear that they are only renting out the property to one party at a time.
So my name is Alan Key. I'm with Larimer County Code Compliance. Yes, that is challenging to enforce, but we would look at it as the advertisement. And as long as the advertisement had that and we didn't receive complaints, then we would consider that acceptable.
And so if someone is complaining that they had, more than 10 or rented to different parties, would they have to use our online
They would have to
system
file a
to file
complaint.
that?
That is correct, an online complaint, and then we would investigate that.
And then they get 3.
Yes, they would be subject to the 3-strike rule. I believe that is correct. Now, that is a short-term rental requirement, not a resort lodge cottage requirement. But I believe with that staff's recommendation that they meet all the short-term rental requirements, that would come into play.
That's correct.
Okay. And how do you monitor that to make sure that's happening? To make sure that that's how it's happening when it's being.
Yeah. Currently in the county, there's no active monitoring for number of guests. Now, if we receive a complaint and we get a review that talks about how the 16 of my family members were able to stay on this property and we really enjoyed everything was set up, that would all be used as evidence, but it becomes very tough to prove.
And that includes that they're not renting the 2 different buildings separately. That would also be something that would have to be complaint driven. We can't monitor that on the sites.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner, at this time?
Not at this time, thank you.
Commissioner Stevens, questions? Okay, I think I have a couple of questions, Samantha. And one is, so this has always been the Bella Vista, Bay Vista resort cottages, and other than the period where they were using it for commercial purposes as a short-term rental when they weren't approved to use it as a short-term rental, how has this property, these 3 cabins, been used? Has it mostly been for family? Other than that period where there were complaints, and then there was a cease and desist order, what has this property been for, these homes?
Sure. So I'm happy to let the applicant fill in any gaps that I miss, but my understanding is that they bought the property in 2019. So I believe that they, if not immediately, soon after buying the property, started using it as short-term rentals, essentially. And that's when we started receiving complaints about the use of the property. And they first made contact with the county in 2021 to learn about the proper process to gain approval for a short-term rental or resort cottages, as we're calling it. So I think for the majority of the time that they've owned the property, notwithstanding the last couple of years when they've been in the process to get approval, it's been used as a rental property. Prior to the current property owners buying the property, I'm not sure how it was used. I believe it probably was used just for single-family residential uses.
Okay. Thank you, Samantha. Well, since we have our code compliance guy at the table, I wonder if you could offer any observations or insights regarding as when those complaints came in that this was being advertised as a short-term rental when it hadn't gone through the process. And I'm understanding from Samantha's comments that perhaps maybe the people didn't know you had to go through a process and get approved. But it seems like there were a couple of efforts to outreach to the folks around you can't do this unless you go through the process and get approved. And then there was a cease and desist, and that maybe they didn't comply with that. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? What took place there, Alan?
Yes, I can. So there was 2 cease and desist letters that ultimately went out for this property. The first one was in February. The following one was in September.
What years, please?
Of 2022. So since that time, since the second cease and desist letter. They have been in compliance with the county. They had invited me out up to that property. I was able to do an inspection as part of the research associated with it. The biggest issue, well, one of the main complaints that we got had to deal with trespassing on neighbors' properties. That was because of a shared easement accessing this property. When they realigned their access, I think that addressed that situation a lot. That's one of the reasons why Samantha brought that up in her presentation.
Thank you, Alan. That's helpful. Samantha, one of the in terms of the input that we've received in the since Friday or so, and that's part of the memo that you provided with us, as well as responses from the applicants. One of the comments that caught my eye was something about the property adjacent to Highway 7, which is where they'll need to get make sure that they've got an agreement with CDOT, but our engineering folks are requiring that there be on record an easement, a right-of-way easement, if I'm understanding that. But they talk about the property is deed restricted for private residential use only with a special restriction, quote, shall not be used for any enterprise conducted for profit. And they're suggesting that because that property, which apparently, according to this, is deed restricted, and folks would have to access the where the proposed rental properties would be, that this might violate that deed restriction. What do you say about that one, Samantha?
It's a great question.
Gosh.
I actually did have a conversation with the county attorney's office specifically about that deed restriction language that was brought up by one of the community members. And it was the agreement of staff and the county's attorney's office that that language does not specifically preclude the subject property from utilizing or from being a resort cottage use or for providing access across that western parcel to the subject property for a resort cottage use. I can bring up a map if you'd like.
Yes, I like
Okay.
I like pictures. It helps me to understand things. Please.
Okay, so for everybody's benefit, the subject property is this one highlighted in blue. The property that is adjacent to the property and also adjacent to Highway 7 is this one right here, ending in 009. It's also owned by the Herds, who own the subject property. And the deed restriction language that you do bring up, again, myself and the county attorney's office had a discussion about that language, and it doesn't necessarily preclude access across 009 to the subject property for resort cottage use.
Thank you, Samantha. And also regarding the access easement, I believe that's condition number 16. So we are requiring as a condition of approval that be addressed.
That's correct. And the access to Levings Way would also need to be closed
That's right.
so that there's just one access point to the property.
Okay. Perhaps I'll pause with my questions for now, and some of them are probably more directed to the applicants. So we will, unless there are other questions of Samantha or staff. Commissioner Stevens, you're good for now? Okie doke. Let's move into the next phase of the hearing, which is the applicant. Welcome, please. Come on up. We're generally a friendly group here. Please be so kind as to introduce yourselves for the record and also to share how much time you think you'll need to do your presentation, sir.
I think we need 10 or 12 minutes.
Did you say 10 or 12?
10 or 12 minutes.
And you're going to split it up between the two of you? This is a tag team effort?
Yes, sir.
Okie doke. Thank you.
This is my much older brother.
Oh, dear.
I'm the oldest. So my name's Dan, and my wife Kelly. We've been married 41 years, and 30 years we've been coming to Estes Park very regularly, usually now 4 to 5 times a year. My brother Paul, I dragged him to get involved in 2019 here, and he has a family. I have a very large family. My wife has 75 in her family. We've got between us 25. So we do talk a lot about this property, and we get a lot of people to come and stay that are friends, but mostly family. I just had some family not too long ago up there. But I wanted to say, first off, dear commissioners, honorable commissioners, Ms. Shattuck McNally, Mr. Kefalas, Mr. Stevens, thank you for listening to us. And I appreciate especially the excellent work of Samantha Lasher the last 2 years to help us and our other staff people that have been helping. So today you have the opportunity to rule on our application for resort cottages, short-term rental license, 2 small cabins we call Bella Vista or Bella Vista. Note this will approve a maximum of only 10 guests, and they all must be the same group or family. In any of our past history, we have never ever rented to or had more than one family there unless we were there and we had another family with us. So that's never happened in our history. I would estimate maybe we might rent this 75 days a year, maybe up to 10 people. So there might be up to 150 people a year that would have a chance to experience this. We've made a new address for the property, spent several $1,000s, many thousands of dollars moving that access road. And I want to say something about this property. This is right next to Highway 7. Highway 7 is very busy, especially on the weekends, especially with loud motorcycle gangs and not gangs, sorry, motorcycle groups. It is very noisy. And so it's interesting to me that the neighbors that are concerned about things, when it comes to noise, I don't see how our property would ever have more noise than just the constant highway. So that's one of the things. But I also want to say something about why I bought this property. So in my history, I grew up as a kid in El Paso, Texas. I was your quintessential 98-pound weakling. I had a very low self-esteem in terms of athleticism and all that, and never saw myself doing much athletic-wise. Come to my mid-30s, I had 4 kids. In Dallas, we had a group from church that wanted to start coming up to Rocky Mountain National Park, and I was like, oh my goodness, that involves hiking. What am I going to do? And after coming here, I started getting obsessed with this thing called Long's Peak, and I don't know if any of y'all have climbed it, but thank you. I've climbed it 4 times, as successful twice. It became like this obsession with me, starting in 1994, 95, 96. I kept trying, kept failing. Sleet stopped me, whatever. And there was finally a point, August 8th, 1999, where I summited. And I've got a picture of that. And it was very, very meaningful and a big deal. And so I've always wanted to have views of Long's Peak or see Long's Peak. I take pictures of it all the time. You see my phone. And my wife's been, hearing me obsessed with this thing for years and years. Finally, in September, or really August 2019, the realtor, Christian Collinet, who represented the Clarks that were selling this property, said, come on out and look at it. It's just gone on the market. And I came out and got to get on that deck. And that deck is right in front of Long's Peak. There is not a single property, I don't think, certainly where there's short-term rentals, that somebody can experience it like that. We actually have the ability to view hikers on the peak. We've taken pictures of my daughter and my son-in-law when they summited. It's pretty amazing to be able to do that. And to me, it just always felt like a short-term rental. And Christian Collinet, when I bought it, said, okay, well, this is an ideal short-term rental, because I said, I don't know how I'm going to afford it. And so it was something that I felt like, though, needs to be shared with people. Everybody I talk to all the time, I'm constantly promoting Estes Park, Larimer County. It's just a big deal to get to come up here. And so that made so much sense to me. And, and so anyway, that's what we were doing. And we had some other short-term rentals in the Larimer County area outside the Estes Valley before this one, but they didn't have a view of Long's Peak, so I ended up selling them in order to buy this. So anyway, we've been working on this application for over 2 years. We have passed all inspections and other rules for resort cottages. We've reworked our plan in order to make it to have, in my opinion, little to no interference in the life of our neighbors. I strongly believe that the noise from the highway, you've already heard me say that, we have opened, my wife and I also, not with ownership with Paul, but with my son-in-law, who's very successful. We own a large vacation rental in Estes Valley. It's gone through all the proper things. We've done that over 10 years. There, we've had 0 neighbor complaints ever, and that's only 2.5 acres. We work closely with our local property manager, Trish Ronan. She helps run our operations very smoothly. She's been invaluable in preparing this application. She's only been with us in the last 12 months, so we're looking forward to a future with her. I want to say something too. The short-term rental that we operate, and I assume this one will be the same way. It's so involved in putting money back into the community. We do not take money out of these properties. There is nobody, getting rich on this. We reinvest all this money back in the community for all the local tradesmen, local hospitality people. We've got electricians, plumbers, septic engineers, John's Well Service, water delivery people, construction remodelers, property managers. We do a lot, I think, for the community. So I'd like to now introduce my brother, Paul Hurt, and he's going to talk.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to present our proposal. This property is about 8 miles south of Estes Park on Highway 7, and as you can see, has incredible views of Longs Peak, and that's why we call it Bella Vista. We're requesting a permit to rent 2 of the 3 cabins. You can kind of see 1, 2, and 3 right there in that picture there. So it would be, as Samantha pointed out, the 2 to the left that we would be renting together. The older cabin was built in the late 1800s, so we've been told. The main cabin was built in 1947 by a family in Los Angeles that used this as a vacation home, and then they subsequently built the other property in the 50s. It is our understanding this has been used as a vacation home, the collection of them, for the past 100 years. The prior owner had a home in Berthoud and used this with his horses in the summertime. And then prior to that, another family in Texas owned it, and then a family in Los Angeles owned it. And the original people that I bought it from, the Levings or the Ames, were from Dallas. So everybody's used it kind of as a vacation resort. The Tohosa Valley is surrounded by Rocky Mountain National Park. And we got Longs Peak to the west, Twin Sisters to the east. Since the park is very special to my brother and I and our families, respecting the wildlife in the park is incredibly important. We've included a special section in the operations manual that's produced by the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Department that addresses the importance of not feeding the wildlife. We've seen wildlife on our property, including elk, deer, bobcats, bears, turkeys, rabbits, squirrels, just to name a few. A neighbor recently said that 2 mountain lions had been spotted in the area. And so respecting the role that the wildlife has in the area is very important to us. We've got a large sign as you exit the cabin that says, reminds everybody, do not feed the wildlife. And so if you would turn to the next page, just kind of showing you a little more detail. That's the diagram there, and the way the 2 parcels are laid out, and where the 3 cabins are. That other building on the parcel by the highway is a barn that can hold up to 3 horses. We have on occasion had friends that have come and brought their horses with them, and used the property in the meadow to the north there to graze their horses. The original driveway there highlighted was to the Levings Road, which is on the north side. In response to the neighbor comments, we sought and got a permit for Highway 7 access across that goes right by the barn, to move access and not have to go across the neighbor's property in Levings. Levings is a private road, so it's also going across people's private property there. If you go to the next page, it kind of shows where the new road is. And we've got, coming straight from the highway to that, we've put logs down to close off the other the other access to Levings Way, to make sure nobody comes that way. There's some mounds of dirt also placed on that old driveway that just makes it really difficult if anybody were to want to go that way. And so that's kind of the new access there. Many of the neighbors, like us, live elsewhere and love coming to this valley in the summers to enjoy the wildlife and views. Some of the neighbors live in the area, and just 3 of the neighbors in the area are visible. The Jansons are about 370 feet to the north. The Miles Kiley property is, you can't see it here, but it's about 470 feet to the south. And then Bradley, which is up there on the top left of the thing, is about 740 feet. Other cabins that are listed are far enough away, and because of the slope of the land, you can't see them from where we are located. And so if you go to the next page, the new access ties into our existing driveway and the parking that's available there. We've got, clearly in our operations manual that will be for our guests, do not use the third cabin there. Do not use the driveway, making it very clear, where they're to park and where the access is. And if you go to the next one, we've also made it very clear that here's the boundaries of our properties, and do not go beyond the boundaries of this property. Do not use that old driveway that's been closed off. Just use the access that's there to the highway.
That when you get people how to have access, you give them the address, 6600 Highway 7. In no way would they ever go to Levings Way. So they would only go to that road.
So anyway, so guests, as a condition of a rental agreement, would have to agree to the rules. One of which is, adhering to the limits of the property, not venturing beyond that. And then if you go to the next page, it kind of shows kind of where we fit in the zone. The picture on the left is kind of the Estes Valley and Tahosa. There's over 500 approved short-term rentals up in the Estes Valley. Down in the Tahosa Valley, which is basically from the Wind River Pass to the Boulder County line, there's only 7 short-term rentals that are currently approved there. I've noted kind of where we're located there, and that's where we are.
Before you continue, Paul?
Yeah.
So that's the alarm. I'm wondering how much more time do you need to?
Just a minute. I've got a summary chart. Just kind of reviewing.
It's all good.
Okay.
Often we ask folks if they need 15 minutes, but if you can move in the direction of your summary chart and the main takeaways here.
Sure. So we desire to be good neighbors, and as demonstrated by our moving the access from Levings Way to Highway 7. We've removed all guest traffic off of Levings Way that would interfere with anything that the neighbors would have. We're renting only to families that would understand the restrictions and agreed to abide by them. We've got secure trash that doesn't disturb the animals. It's stored in the basement, closed and locked. We have rules and signage up about feeding wildlife. We've clearly identified where the neighbor property is, and we're willing to put up any signage necessary to keep guests from wandering off the property. We have a local property manager, Trish Ronan, who's been very helpful and attentive to our guests and requirements. We pay our taxes on time, and we respectfully request your approval of our short-term proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, do you have any questions of the applicants? Commissioner Shattuck McNally, anything? Oh, Commissioner Stevens?
Not right now, thank you.
My understanding in reading through some of the referring agency comments is there are still some outstanding code compliance issues, and I think there's a need to secure as-built permits because a lot of this stuff was built before we have had some of the land use code provisions in place. Can you all speak to that? Or perhaps Alan or our planner?
I'm getting the head nod. So again, Alan Key, Larimer County Code Compliance. Yes, there are some as-built issues that we would have to address. There's been a few remodels, but that would all be handled once we know which process we're going through, whether it's single-family residence or resort lodge cottage.
Thank you, Sarah. And is that, I was looking through the 19 conditions of approval. Is that in there?
That's not a specific condition of approval, but generally as part of the life safety inspection process, all as-built requirements have to be taken care of. So we're happy to add an additional condition if you'd like, but it's usually wrapped in.
No, thank you for that reminder,
Of course.
Samantha. I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you, folks.
All right, thank you.
So go on. You can go on and,
Go sit down.
again, at this point, we will, in a moment, open it up to public comment. And I recommend you use your active listening skills to see what folks have to say. So we'll open up public comment portion of the hearing. Is there anybody here? Of course. Thank you for your. There are two folks who've raised their hand. Thank you for your patience, sir. Please come on up. Yes, and then we'll go to the person in the back. Welcome, and please identify yourself and all the rest.
Yes, sir. My name is Andrew Jansen, Jansen, and my family is a neighbor of this property. We've owned this cabin at 408 Levings Way since my grandmother bought it in 1941. And it makes me happy now to see a fourth generation of our family coming up there to enjoy it. And the pleasant surroundings and the environment. I'm a big fan of Long's Peak myself. I've been to the summit 50 times during my life. And I want my family members and the young ones to have the same opportunities as I did growing up there as a child. And with all this in mind, I'm offering my objection to passing this. Our property shares a boundary of over 320 feet with the Bella Vista Estate, whose main building is about 100 feet or so from the property line. Just to give you a point of reference from the earlier map, just to the north of the Bella Vista rental portion of their estate, their old access line and is actually on the bottom of our property. They had an easement for that, which that issue's been resolved. They have their separate entrance now, so that's no longer an issue at all. Our cabins are fairly close together, so the environment there can, obviously affect our sanctity there. And I believe that there's a fundamental difference between a neighboring family that lives by you and a household occupied by a different group, that could change every week. And short-term renters often don't share mutual interest in the history and preservation of the surroundings. Most probably would, but there are some who don't. And some groups renting for parties or celebrations, I believe, could create a noise situation and other uneasiness to change our surroundings and our environment. And I also worry about a group being clumsy in regard to fire prevention, and it only takes one person to create a problem in that regard. If my objections are overruled, however, my family does expect a condition should be in place that the property owners, Bella Vista owners, first construct a fence separating our two properties. And it's my understanding that such a thing is required by law or statute for such enterprises. And currently, there's no barrier, fence, or anything of any kind in between our two properties. So anyway, thank you.
Goodness, thank you, sir. And I appreciate you standing in for your brother, who, according to the written comments we received from your family, he was not able to be here. So thank you. Hello. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I actually sent comments. My name is Penny Hilton. That is Penny like the coin, Hilton like the hotel, for spelling purposes. My standard response to anybody who asks me to spell my name. We have the property to the north of the smaller parcel across Levings Way. It's parcel 3426000018. We are currently in the process of developing it, getting all the infrastructure in. Like the herds, our family is very attached to Long's Peak. My husband taught my son how to climb and boulder there, and our son has climbed the face several times. So when we found the property, which is very unusual in Arrow County to find a property like that, It was a hilarious day to watch my husband and my son jump around like baby elk, enjoying their first day in the snow. It was crazy. It was fun. It was something we just grew to love immediately. One thing we've learned is that when you own a piece of rural property, you have to do a lot to protect it. So I'm here today, instead of just writing words, to voice our opposition. And I've had plenty of opposition written, and this has nothing to do with the herds personally. It's just in the operation. It's been disconcerting to be next to it. They explained that they owned other STRs in the area, and yet they didn't apply, right? They chose to be non-compliant. They chose to put this on us. We feel like it's a burden. We're constantly on guard. We've had to put up cameras to capture the trespass, because without the camera, it's just testimony one to the other. And there's a lot of effort in having to protect that. And that's not something we expected to have to do after meeting the neighbors that live on the hill before us. In fact, when we bought the property, we wanted to assure them that we were going to do everything we could not to disturb their way of life. We wanted to join it, or at least be on the edge of it, and enjoy that environment as well, the one that they created and their families had created. We are developing off the main road so that they don't have to look at a house when they come up Levings Way. So it looks like it used to for them. I need to address the code compliance. They said that there hadn't been any issues since 2022. I wrote in our comments this just year that we do, and we provided evidence, although I did not provide a complaint to compliance, that in June of 2023, there was a small wedding there. It was treated like a venue. I am the person who brought up the deed restriction, and I respectfully request a legal response to that, and how you made your decision that you can cross the property to a for-profit activity. I'd just like to have that personally.
Penny, forgive me, we're at the 3-minute mark. Could you, a closing sentence or statement, please?
Sure. We remain in opposition. We believe that the behaviors that we've experienced to date will continue, because they have been presented that way. That does not take away from what we believe the herds love about the property. It's just that we don't have any behavior change that really represents the risk to us, to the trespass, and to fire, as the Jensens are worried about, so are we, that those are going to be mitigated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you kindly. Okay. Is there anyone else here in person who wishes to offer public comment? Then we'll check online. Shalina, are there any folks there?
If there's anyone online who would like to make public comment on this agenda
I
topic,
did see a raised hand. Elizabeth Schofner.
please raise your hand now. All right, Elizabeth, I will allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and spell your name for the record.
Okay, my name is Elizabeth Schaffner. It's spelled S as in Sam, Hoff as in Frank, Ner. We also have a property there, and we're there mostly in the summer. And so I'm going to make our comments short. We're very happy that the herds moved their road. But one thing that we'd like to be in a condition is that they have a better way of blocking off the old road to Levings Way. They just have logs across the road, and it seems like they could have something better than that. We also think that they should definitely build a fence between them and the Jansens, because the Jansens are the most immediately affected by the people there that are coming in and out. And we've been happy with what they've done, and the improvements they made, but we are concerned that they owned the property for several years and didn't even apply for an STR. That's, and especially since they said that they'd owned other properties in Larimer County before, I don't think they can give an excuse that they didn't know that they needed to do that. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Is there anyone else, Shalena, online?
If anybody else would like to provide public comment on this agenda topic, please raise your hand now. Mr. Chair, there are no further hands.
No. Did you say there's no one?
No one, correct.
All right. Then we'll close public comment and open up an opportunity for the applicants to offer rebuttal, to respond to what they've heard from the folks here in person and Elizabeth online.
Certainly, thank you. First off, behavior absolutely has changed hugely. The other short-term rental is in the Estes Valley, and that's been managed very differently. There's been the cap of the number of properties. It's been something that was handled, I guess, by the town of Estes going back when we bought in 2013 and 14. But outside of that, the county had hundreds of short-term rentals that had not gone through any approval. So I was just like all the other hundreds, and I would go online and Google and see this one and that one. So that all got shut down in 2022, especially after September. So there's been very different changes. We had friends that got married. I checked the rules with Larimer County. If you have 39 or less, you don't have to file to get approval to do a wedding. At least that's what I understood. And it was just one afternoon. So, but we're not doing any more weddings. We're only renting to 10, hopefully in the future. But I did want to say we very much responded, and we did not know certainly that the county cared in 2019 and 20 about this. So, thank you. Do you want to address
thank you, Dan.
The commercial property or?
With respect to the border with the Jansens, we're willing to put in a fence there, and then if whatever's a suitable closure on the road, we put some logs down there. There's no way to drive through that, but if there's something that would be a more permanent or suitable way to do that, we're more than willing to do that. I don't know what. I don't know what it would need to be considered closed, maybe a big X or something, but we're willing to do that.
Anything else you folks want to say?
And with respect to the fire, there was a fire pit there when we bought it, but because of the short-term rental regulations, we removed that, and so there's no outdoor fire pit anymore. I'm trying to think, was there anything else that jumped out?
Were you wanting to speak, good sir? And if you are, I know you know the routine.
Yes, thank you, Bob Choate, and I'm here with the herds, and I just wanted to address the deed restriction issue, and just because it has come up, the first thing I'd say is like a private covenant. This is the county is not in the business of enforcing covenants. And this is disputed. It would be much more appropriate for a court to decide. It's kind of outside of what you all would be looking at. But at a minimum, it does not limit or restrict this particular property. It's just not applicable. So I'm asking you to not consider that because it's just not applicable here. So happy to answer any questions on that issue.
Okay, this is again rebuttal time. Unless my colleagues have questions or you've responded to everything you've heard from the Jansens, the Hiltons, and I mispronounced it initially, Elizabeth, Schaffner, I believe, Elizabeth Schaffner. Okay, thank you, folks. Oh, did you have a question for them?
No, for the staff.
Yes, I imagine we all. Yes, okay, thank you very much. So at this time, Samantha knows the routine. I believe we have a few questions. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, please begin.
Samantha, I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it publicly for the benefit of the applicant and others. Um, Whether the property was in Estes Valley or the county, we've had short-term regulations in place since 2000
September 2019.
and all of those that we could find, property owners were contacted and sent notices that there was a new, because when we updated the regulations, they were informed of that and the life safety issues and or some of these folks in the other parts of the county not contacted? I'm just curious.
That is my understanding when the regulations were first adopted in 2019. I wasn't here in 2019, so I don't know all of the outreach that was done. Alan, with code compliance, may know, but it was my understanding that property owners were not notified, or were notified.
Sorry, I was not with code compliance at that point in time. I don't know what notifications they did with that.
No problem. I believe, though, that you're correct. The outreach was done at the time to notify property owners that there were regulations in place now.
And that would include the Estes Valley, and so those were all included. So this has been something that in 2019, and when they're updated, I believe it was last year, all those folks received those got updates about these new changes, correct?
And Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, with regards to the regulations that were updated last year, I don't know if property owners were specifically notified of the regulations that were being updated. I believe it was more of a general notice, but I do believe there was outreach provided provided in 2019 when the regulations were first adopted, and it would have included the Estes Valley as well.
Okay, and other parts of the county?
That's correct.
Okay, and then if I might, Mr. Chair, since there's one piece of this property that they're talking about having only for personal use, and the rest are for commercial use, and so do the regulations about fire pits and other things apply to the personal too, or is the personal able to have different activities around it, like fire pits, et cetera, because they're not being used for short-term rental?
You are right. So the short-term rental guests would not be permitted to use a fire pit as part of their rental. But if the owners were utilizing that third cabin for private use, they could have a fire pit on property for their own use. But if they did have a fire pit, it would have to be locked or removed so that guests could not access it.
And remind me, I think we put this into the new regulations. I could be, I mean, it feels like a long time ago we worked on those. Activities or events are not allowed with the short-term rentals, correct? Or they have to apply for a special use permit if that, or I'm trying to remember what that was.
You are correct that the new regulations specifically prohibit a short-term rental being used as an event venue. This application, of course, came in 2022, but we did add a condition of approval to this one that it cannot be used as an event venue unless additional approvals were received through either a special event permit or a more permanent approval like an assembly use. However, the property owners could utilize the property for their own personal events as we define in the land use code, again, for their own private events not related to the resort cottage use.
When you say not used for events, that doesn't matter the number of people, because that is the common excuse is it's under 40. So curious about that.
Yeah, so we define in Article 7 of the Land Use Code that you have to have a special events permit for any event on a property where overall attendance will exceed 40 people. So if they had a personal event as the owners of the property that were less than 40 people, and if the event were defined as a personal event, as we define in the land use code, which could include a wedding, but there are certain standards they'd have to meet, they could do that as the property owners, but they could not use the property as a public event venue space without either a special events permit or a more permanent approval, which would be reviewed under a separate process.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, any questions?
Yeah, maybe for Alan. There were 2 cease and desists, though, right? So, I mean, I can understand maybe people didn't understand the rules, but they certainly would after the first cease and desist. Would that have been the first communication that they would have received then, that there was, I mean, just can you kind of talk about the timeline a little bit? Just because it seems like after the first one you would understand that you were out of compliance.
Yes, again, Alan Key, Larimer County Code Compliance. That would have been our understanding as well. After the second letter, communication with the owners greatly improved, and it's been good since then.
Thank you. Thanks.
Anything else, Commissioner?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Oh.
Yes, please.
I guess, can you talk about proximity to Rocky Mountain National Park? So, is that shown in the map?
They're on the other side of the road.
Yeah, I'm happy to bring the map back up for you.
Thanks. Other side of the road. Okay, thanks.
So you can see that the areas shaded in green are Rocky Mountain National Park. I can do a basic measurement for you if you'd like for proximity.
No, that's fine. I just wanted some, just for reference. Thank you.
A question that I have at the moment would be for our engineering person. Connor, are there standards, engineering standards for proper ways to close off access to a road that people shouldn't be accessing other than a few logs and piles of dirt?
It's really handled on a case-by-case basis. We usually coordinate with our access coordinator on the best way to accomplish that for the particular road that's being closed. Even in cases where Levings, such as Levings Way, which is a private road, not a public right-of-way, he wouldn't have typically, outside of a process, requirements for them, but he has the most experience with closing down access points, so he can usually figure out the best way to do that without impacting the right-of-way. Oftentimes, like, large boulders are used, just things that ideally can't be moved. So if it's, large logs that wouldn't be able to be moved by, an average person or group of people, typically that's what we're looking for. So yeah, closing down the access point to Levings Way was one of my conditions of approval, and or it was listed in my comments as a requirement, and so we would expect that be done in a manner that was appropriate. So happy to follow up on that and determine if the logs that they've used would be an adequate closure. I can run that by our access coordinator. As I said, he wouldn't have any, requirements there since it's not a public right of way, but he would have very useful input.
Excuse me, I know I already had my.
Yes,
It's just in reference to.
Please.
It's on our land.
Yeah,
I just asked that.
Thank you.
Be involved.
Thank you. So, if we were to move forward with this, you said there's already a condition of approval around the access to the road? Connor, is that in there? Where is it? What number? Please.
I believe it is number 16, but let me just verify. Yes, number 16. It's sort of a two-part condition of approval. It's on page 541 of your packet.
Yeah, I'm looking, yes. And it seems to me it would be, again, if we move forward with this, appropriate to add to the language on that second sentence, additionally, access to Levings Way will need to be closed for the subject property and approved by our county engineering, our access people, something like that.
That's reasonable. We can add that.
Just a thought for the moment. Let's see. Any other questions, colleagues of staff? Commissioner? Okay. Then I believe we can move into the deliberation phase of the hearing. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, please begin.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here today. I'm born and raised in this area, going up to the Rocky Mountain Park every year of my life. I hike that area constantly. I hike and camp in that area, so I am aware of the noise, and I know that area very, very well. And so just wanted to say I appreciate all of you coming down from the Tohosa Valley. It's a very unique and special place, and it is one of the few places left in kind of the valley that's kind of got that peaceful atmosphere, and for all those who are lucky to live there, know that it's a very unique and indigenous, very important indigenous area as well. So just I just wanted to share that. So I'm very aware of that. That's in my district, and so I'm very active in that area. So I appreciate 19 conditions. But I always say if there's that many conditions, then that makes me wonder, how enforceable that is, how much issues it is. Obviously, the owners had in the Estes Valley, outside of the town of Estes, and know that there was probably a process. It is something that's well known, and if you're renting on sites, I think it's also well known to that there is kind of licensure and processes for getting approval and operating within the legal realm of having a short-term rental. There was 2 cease and desist letters and a wedding, and I think if you knew that you had to be under 39, then you probably knew there was other rules and regulations, and that just gives me pause about enforcement and following through. And I've read through all the comments from the neighbors. There's obviously a lot of opposition to this, and I do think by putting up a fence and adding more infrastructure to this, I think it will have impacts on the environment and wildlife and access and emergency services. I do think adding any weddings and events and large parties out there adds to the noise and impacts of a very peaceful valley. Also, I do think that there already has been evidence of trespassing and conflicts with the neighbors, and then not following, kind of responding to cease and desist letters. So I do not feel that the proposed use has more than minimal impacts on existing and future development of the area. And I do think that I do not think the impacts associated with environment, wildlife, access, traffic, and wildfire, parking, refuse, all these adverse impacts have not been adequately addressed or mitigated. And I do think that there's still an increase with lots of things: the increased noise, increased trespassing, increased wildlife, increased wildfire. I just think that it is still probably going to be something where this could be still used as an event venue, and we'd have a hard time enforcing any of these 19 conditions. I do not feel they have met all the criteria, and therefore I cannot support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for everyone who came down. Thank you for the applicants for presenting your case. I will concur with my colleague, Commissioner Shattuck McNally. I don't think that the criteria have been met for number one, the minimal impacts on existing and future development of the area. I don't feel like a short-term rental fits with the character of the area. I think that the neighbors, while we only heard from a few neighbors today, we heard from 10 neighbors and their family members via email a couple different times. It looks like, and so I just don't feel like this fits with the character of the area. I think that there will be impacts. There's certainly trespassing could be one of the impacts, and I just don't. It seems like things weren't handled well the first time, and I have no, secure feeling that they will be handled correctly this second time, and with regard to criteria 2, I'm not sure. I didn't hear necessarily specific evidence about negative impacts to wildlife, but I think that could be possible for sure. Wildfire risk is always something that we're concerned with, but it just seems like this is a quiet neighborhood, and this is bringing in 10 people with 2 different buildings. I just feel like the impact to the existing neighborhood would be such that it would change the way of life in that neighborhood. And so I will be voting no on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Once again, I struggle with these applications. I remind us that we have to base our decisions on the review criteria. I think for me, the one that is most meaningful that I don't believe has been met is number 1, regarding impacts. We've heard from folks that have been there for generations. There's a lot of history in that area. Interestingly, I must have driven by the cottages just on Friday. We hiked up the Wild Basin up to Ouzel Lake, and that was an amazing hike. So I don't honestly believe that that this proposal to allow for a small scale, under 10 or less guests, is compatible with that area, which is quite pristine. We didn't drive by in a motorcycle. We drove by in a Prius, so hopefully that didn't add to the noise. But all that silliness aside, I'm sticking with the first criterion that I think legitimate concerns have been raised by the neighbors. I had thought for a moment, well, we could put up a fence that would address that, and certainly working with our engineering folks on the access to the Levings Way Road. So I too will not be supporting this application. And I also wanted to say, again, my decision is based on what I just described regarding the criterion, although I do have some issues with past behavior and 2 cease and desist, but that doesn't really play into how we're supposed to base our decision. And then suggesting that when it was being operated as a short-term rental, there's a bit of a disconnect that I think was pointed out, that we had initial STR regulations in place in September of 2019, and that applied to the valley, the unincorporated parts, and not knowing that there's a disconnect. There might be an explanation. I'm not suggesting, but there is a disconnect for me, and whatever may have happened in the past. Again, that is not relevant to our decision, but I will, on criterion 2, and I will point out on the wildfire risk that they did pass the wildfire risk inspection report regarding home ignition zones. So I think they've made a authentic, a genuine effort to address the concerns up there. So I will not be supporting the application. I'm sorry to the applicants. Commissioner Stevens, I think it's your, is that right? Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Shattuck can do it.
Oh, is it Commissioner Shattuck? Yeah, okay, back to you.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Board of County Commissioners deny the Bella Vista Resort Cottages Administrative Special Review File Number 22-ZONE 3344.
Thank you, Commissioner. Proper motion. Any further discussion, colleagues? Um, Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to deny?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. At 5:48 p.m. we are adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you.